Happy New Year from Chapter and Verse 2018. We have Tina Christy from the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights. Tina, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, what a topic this is. It's an exciting topic because it's been culturally like a tsunami. I was looking through the Associated Press file the other day from 28th of November, 2017, Tuesday. This is on page A6 of the Providence Journal newspaper. And the word of the year, according to dictionary.com, is complicit. And the reason why people looked up the word complicit had to do with the Russian election influence and the ever-widening sexual harassment scandal, mass shootings, and the opioid epidemic. This is like a tiger by the tail. I was looking through an Associated Press survey. It says that 60% of the people in America believe that there's too little protection for victims of sexual harassment. 37% believe that there's too little protection for the accused. 35% believe that it's the right amount. 26% believe that it's too much. 56% of Americans think harassment is a major problem at work. 56% of Americans think harassment is a major problem at work. 33% of Americans say that sexual misconduct is a very serious problem at the workplace. 33%. 33% of the women say they've experienced sexual harassment at work. 10% of the males say that they've experienced sexual misconduct at work. 2/3 of sexual misconduct happens in most of all workplaces. 80% say false accusations happen at least some of the time. 33% of women worry about becoming victims. 33% of men worry about becoming falsely accused. 55% of Americans think that change for the better for women will occur now. It's affected the military, the politics, entertainment, news. In Rhode Island, we have a legal case involving a female firefighter, a female police woman. It's been in the news about schools and in businesses. You've been working in this area for 23 years.
Yes, I have.
And what is the change now between a year or two ago and now?
Well, I think the biggest change for me, which is very exciting, is that more people are becoming aware of sexual harassment and not tolerating it, coming forward and speaking out of instances where they have been victims of sexual harassment and saying, we're not tolerating this anymore, it's illegal.
Yes. I was a little surprised that things got so massive culturally. I mean, I expect a daily news coverage at times of war, the war correspondents to have a place on the front page every day. In a political contest, especially during an election year for president, I'm expecting a lot of talk to be covered on the electronic news and in the print news. Then there are cultural events which get the attention of the average person, like when Elvis Presley in 1956 appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, broke all television records. People were talking about it over the backyard fences. It was people were just very interested to find out what revolutionary thing was happening to our society when Elvis Presley arrived. In 1964, the Beatles came to America and appeared on the same show, the Ed Sullivan Show. They broke all television records, and they were very much discussed. by people. But this is about as big a story as those. And this has to do with correct and incorrect behavior in the workplace.
Exactly. And the Commission for Human Rights has been around. We were created in 1949 upon the enactment of the Fair Employment Practices Act.
Yeah.
The Fair Employment Practices Act is the law that the Commission for Human Rights, one of the laws that the Commission for Human Rights enforces. It's an anti-discrimination law, which sexual harassment falls under. So in the state of Rhode Island, we've had protections against discrimination since 1949, so we're very fortunate. And
Tina, how did it come to be?
it was an act of the General Assembly that created the Commission for Human Rights and passed the law, the Fair Employment Practices Act, that makes it illegal to discriminate against employees in the state of Rhode Island.
What was the history? How did people get on the ball, so to speak, on that subject in 1949?
Well, I believe that, fortunately for us, we live in Rhode Island. We're a very forward-thinking state, and realized that people were being discriminated against and that these laws were necessary for the betterment of the community.
Yeah.
Mm. I wanted to mention Ronan Farrow. Are you familiar with Ronan Farrow?
No, I'm not.
Okay, he's the son of Mia Farrow, the actress, whose most famous work was probably Rosemary's Baby, done by Roman Polanski many years ago. Ronan Farrow is the son of Mia Farrow and Frank Sinatra, and he became a correspondent for the New York Times, and he was trying to work for NBC News. He had 4 interviews from Hollywood starlets in the bank. He had them ready to go. He went to the New York Times and said, "I've got 4 interviews on tape. We're ready to go with this story." They had protected Harvey Weinstein in the past, and it appeared as if they were going to protect him again. Harvey Weinstein, the Hollywood producer, whose name kind of started the whole controversy. The New York Times turned Ronan Farrow down with the story. They said, "You're not ready for prime time. This story is not written well enough for us to carry it." So he walked across the street to NBC News, and he said, "I've got 4 interviews ready to go. They're on camera. Well, we think we have a story here." NBC News, which apparently was reported to have protected Harvey Weinstein in the past, apparently was going to do it again. So Ronan Farrow walked across the street again to the New Yorker. They accepted him, and that started the whole ball rolling in this whole current attention to the subject of sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good news, thankfully for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has brought this really serious, important topic to the forefront, and, the commission is ready to, take in allegations of sexual harassment in employment, housing, public accommodations, delivery of credit, and delivery of services and credit. Those are the areas that we cover in employment. And sexual harassment is a protected group in many of those laws that we cover.
Yes. What is the dynamic of sexual harassment in the workplace? What sort of things fall into place when a case is being considered about sexual harassment? What sort of things happen?
Okay, if someone feels like they're being sexually harassed, say in the workplace, they would come to the commission, and they would talk to what we call an information officer of the day. There are 6 investigators at the Commission for Human Rights, and we take turns being the information officer of the day, talking to people who either walk in or make a telephone call to contact us. If somebody feels like they're being discriminated against or sexually harassed, we'll listen to their story and see if they meet meet the Commission's jurisdiction in filing a charge. So one requirement in employment is that there are 4 or more employees to file a charge of sexual harassment. The alleged discrimination or sexual harassment in this instance would have to have occurred within 1 year. So if you feel like you're being discriminated against or sexually harassed, you have 1 year to file a charge with the Commission. And if the alleged act occurred in the state of Rhode Island, then we would take in a charge of discrimination for someone. So, for instance, if someone feels like they're being sexually harassed, you know, like I said, I listened to the story. Sexual harassment is unwanted and unwelcomed. So it's sexual advances or sexual favors, verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature that constitutes sexual harassment. When either submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. If rejection of the conduct is used as the basis of making employment decisions affecting that individual, or if the behavior has the purpose or effect of creating an intimidating and hostile work environment, or making it such that a person it unreasonably interferes with their work performance. So those are the things that we would look at to see if a person is qualified to file a charge.
How many lawyers do you have on the commission?
We have 2 legal counsel staff members. Yes.
So a victim in this case would be subject to belittlement. People would belittle I guess it's mostly like 90% female, the victims.
So right now, I have a caseload of about 50 cases. I have
50?
Yes, I have a case where a male is accused of sexually harassing a male, where a woman is accused of sexually harassing a man, and where a woman is accused of sexually harassing a woman. So there are all types of sexual harassment, not just a woman being sexually harassed.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it cuts across gender borders.
Yes, it does.
Is it more prevalent, the women being sexually harassed, Tina?
I see more charges of sexual harassment made by women at this point. I see more men filing charges of sexual harassment, and we'll see where that goes in the next few years. It's all, I believe it's about positions of power. So the more that we see women in positions of power, we could see more charges of sexual harassment made by males.
Isn't power always there? We want power.
That's a really important insight, Sandy. That seems to be the key. Power.
Yes, it can be.
What do you suppose makes perpetrators act that way? Is it just simply an expression of power?
Well, like I was explaining in the definition of sexual harassment, you can have the purpose of sexually harassing someone, or you can have the effect of sexually harassing someone. Now, generally, having the purpose of sexual harassment it would be necessary for a person to be and have some sort of power over somebody else. Yeah. So a supervisor and a subordinate, and a supervisor saying something like, if you have sex with me, you'll get the promotion. So, that's a person in a position of power who is purposefully sexually harassing someone. There can also be the effect of sexual harassment by, telling jokes of a sexual nature, not necessarily quid pro quo sexual harassment, like saying, if you have sex with me, you'll get the job.
Yeah.
But more of a hostile work environment where there's jokes of a sexual nature, or maybe even inappropriate touching in the workplace.
Is it more common that those who are in a position of power are the sexual?
Well, I see both kinds. So I see quid pro quo sexual harassment, and that would be, a supervisor, subordinate situation, and I also see hostile work environment sexual harassment where coworkers are creating hostile work environments for other coworkers by acting inappropriately in the workplace based on sex.
Yeah.
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 There was a study by John Pryor in 1989. He's a psychologist at Illinois State University, and he said that one of the things that causes sexual harassers is a lack of empathy, a belief in traditional gender sex roles, and a tendency towards dominance or authoritarianism. And he said impunity also plays a larger role. People can get away with it, and they know that they can get away with it, or they think they can get away with it.
You know, I'm glad that you brought that up because we do have a retaliation law that says if you report sexual harassment or discrimination, or you are a witness to sexual harassment or discrimination, and you come forward, that you're protected from being retaliated against under the law. So the fact that people may believe that if they report it, nothing's going to be done, or that they may be retaliated against, isn't true, because we do have the retaliation law to protect people who either complain of discrimination or who support someone who's been discriminated against by being a witness.
Paul Sorvino is a popular actor who appeared very successfully.
Who's this now?
Paul Sorvino is an actor in a very popular American drama called The Sopranos.
The Sopranos, did you say?
Yeah. His daughter.
I used to like that.
Yeah. He has a daughter, Mira, I think, M-I-R-A, Mira Sorvino. She met with Harvey Weinstein, reportedly, and he reportedly said to her, in a quid pro quo fashion, that if she didn't comply with his demands, she would not work in Hollywood again.
Oh.
She wasn't able to, he blacklisted her. She wasn't able to work in Hollywood for years after that. Now, maybe she'll get a job now. Things seem to be changing now. But Paul Sorvino was very upset when he found out. He's her dad. And he's very upset, as a lot of dads could be.
So, like, relating that to employment discrimination, if somebody filed a charge of sexual harassment with the commission, and there was an investigation done. At the commission, we do an unbiased investigation of the facts. So the investigators are fact gatherers, and we gather all the information. And then we would make a recommendation whether or not there's enough evidence to support that discrimination happened, which we call probable cause, or no probable cause, that there was insufficient evidence to support that discrimination may have occurred. Even if there was a recommendation of no probable cause on a piece of, say, sexual harassment or any other type of discrimination. If there was retaliation because of the reporting of sexual harassment, that person could file a charge of retaliation and be successful. For instance, a person filed a charge with the commission. I was investigating the charge of discrimination. That person was terminated during the investigation. And when I asked the employer why the person was terminated, they said, because they filed a charge of discrimination.
Oh, wow.
So
Really
that was an
open
easy
about
one
it.
for me. They didn't realize that it was against the law to do that. So even before determining whether there was sufficient evidence to support whether discrimination existed in the first charge, the retaliation charge was a probable cause, an easy probable cause case. So if somebody does report discrimination and they're retaliated against, we gather information to look at that. So to try to relate that to an actress not getting a job, we would investigate, interview witnesses to determine whether or not somebody is stopping someone from being promoted or receiving other benefits and terms and conditions of employment because they rejected the conduct or reported the conduct.
Yeah. Tina, how did you get on the commission? This is wonderful. What led you to this?
It's a wonderful
Apparently
job.
you've got the heart for it. Beautiful.
I'm very
You
passionate
care.
about discrimination. I was a senior at URI doing an internship for the Commission for Human Rights, and when I got there, I realized that that was my passion. And
You did your internship with them?
I did. And
How exciting.
It was so exciting. And I said, I have to be here. So I applied for a position. The first job I had there was as a receptionist. And then I became an investigator, and now I'm a senior compliance officer doing investigations, and I'm also a mediator for the commission. So it's a great job.
What's it like trying to get the facts? Are people forthcoming, or do they clam up, or maybe both?
That's a fantastic question. I find most people to be forthcoming. We request information from both parties, the complainant, the person that files the charge, the company, the respondent, we call them. They're the ones that the charge is filed against. We request information from them 99% of the time. The information comes to us. And when it doesn't, we have subpoena power. So we can subpoena the information. As far as witnesses go, we interview witnesses, and many of them, speaking with them on the phone, are honest about whether or not, I feel honest about whether or not they witnessed discrimination. And even if, in a case, if a witness says that they didn't, there might be another person who says that they did witness some sort of discrimination.
I imagine there are some companies that are repeatedly guilty.
There are companies who do have more than one charge filed against them at some point. Yeah, it does happen.
How does the law make somebody whole after they've experienced a downside, like a sexual harassment experience? What does the law do? Does the law promote them or bring them back to where their former position was?
So that's a great question. So getting back to the commission's process, and we kind of talked about how a person contacts the commission, and we talk to them about whether or not we meet if they meet the jurisdiction to file a charge, and then the charge is officially filed and it's assigned to an investigator. At that point, the investigator tries to bring the parties together for a resolution. And if that doesn't happen, then we gather all the evidence to make a recommendation. So if there is a recommendation by an investigator to a commissioner that there is no probable cause to believe that discrimination happened, and a commissioner agrees with the report and the findings, the case will be closed. But if there is probable cause to believe that discrimination may have happened, the case goes forward to, at first there's a conciliation effort to attempt to bring the parties together again for a resolution. And if that doesn't happen, the case goes to hearing. We have 6 commissioners, or maybe we have actually 7 commissioners, and they act as judges. The commission has a quasi-courtroom setting. Sworn testimony is taken, and the commissioner will weigh all the evidence and make a determination. If there is insufficient evidence to find that discrimination happened, the case will be dismissed and closed.
Yeah.
If the commissioner finds for the complainant that discrimination did happen, the remedies can be back pay, benefits, pain and suffering, the next available promotion or position that the person was denied, and oftentimes there'll be 12% interest on the remedies as well. So discrimination can be very costly.
Who usually gets involved during the investigation? The supervisor, then you go higher? The owner of the company or a higher up?
So if we're talking about
the hierarchy there, who gets involved?
So if we're talking about a charge that's filed at the commission, that would be separate from an in-house complaint. So are we talking about if someone feels like they're discriminated against at work and they go to, say, human resources? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, I
or-
see, yeah.
Well, so,
You know, in the companies, who gets involved in this once the complaint has been made and you're investigating it?
okay, so,
You know?
so respondents, the company, will designate someone to be the, representative. Sometimes they have an attorney that they hire. Sometimes it's the owner of a company. Sometimes it's the HR department. So, that would depend on the
It depends.
It would depend on the company.
Right,
Yes.
yeah.
There's a fellow on two fellows on PBS. One of the fellow by the name of Tavis Smiley, who does a talk show, and there's another PBS fellow by the name of Charlie Rose, who's an incredibly good interviewer. Both Charlie Rose and Tavis Smiley believe that the part of the act, and Matt Lauer also believes, and James Franco and Al Franken all believe that some of the charges against them were inaccurate. What do you do? Is there a way to find the truth out in a contested?
So as an investigator,
Yeah.
I look at the evidence. So does the evidence support that discrimination or sexual harassment occurred, or does it not support that sexual harassment occurred? I have to say, I do hear some discussion about frivolous complaints filed, and I don't believe that I have investigated frivolous complaints. It takes a lot for someone to come forward and complain about sexual harassment, and
Yeah.
whether or not the evidence supports that it happened,
Yeah.
I don't believe that the charges that I investigate are frivolous.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're going to probably have about 2 minutes left in this particular program. So I want to thank you and the audience for listening to a fascinating program and being part of a fascinating program.
Thank you for having me.
And next week we'll continue with this different aspects of the same fascinating subject. So much in the news.
I would like to just tell the audience that if they feel like they're being discriminated against or sexually harassed, that they should call the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights at 222-2662, and you'll be put in touch with an investigator.
God loves you, and so do we.